They laughed at him in his own house. Not behind his back, not in whispers, not in some secret group chat he was never supposed to find. They laughed where his daughter's drawings still hung on the refrigerator, where he had paid every bill, fixed every leak, and built every shelf with his own hands. The man his wife was sleeping with sat at his kitchen island drinking from his favorite mug, while she stood there smiling like 12 years of marriage had been a prank. By the time the truth finished unfolding that night in Charlotte, North Carolina, Omari Vance realized something cold and permanent. Mercy was a luxury he could no longer afford. Before we get into this story, hit like and subscribe if you love drama that cuts deep, comebacks that hit harder than Betrayal, and stories that make you stop and ask, what would I have done? Drop your city in the comments. 2, because this one is going to have people arguing from start to finish. Some of you will say Omari went too far. Others will say he didn't go far enough. Either way, stay to the end, because every second of humiliation he swallowed turned into something his wife never saw coming. Now let's get into it. Omari Vance was 38, broad-shouldered, soft-spoken, and the kind of black man people trusted the second he shook their hand. He ran a custom flooring business that had taken him 13 years to build from the trunk of a used Chevy truck into a respected operation across Charlotte's wealthier neighborhoods. His wife, Nia Serrano Vance, was 35, magnetic, sharp-tongued, and beautiful in a way that made people pause mid-sentence. Together, they looked like a power couple. They had one daughter, Amaya, 9 years old, brilliant and observant. From the outside, their brick home in Ballantine looked steady, polished, and blessed. From the inside, however, the foundation had already started cracking. The first warning wasn't lipstick on a collar or a suspicious text. It was contempt. Contempt had moved into Nia's voice months earlier, wearing the disguise of jokes. She started correcting Omari in front of people, rolling her eyes when he spoke, smirking when he forgot tiny things, and calling him predictable like steadiness was a flaw. At dinner parties, she'd say things such as, Omari is a good provider, but excitement was never really his department, then laugh while guests shifted awkwardly in their seats. He would force a smile and keep chewing. Men like him were trained to endure disrespect quietly, especially when children were watching and company was over. Her new crowd made everything worse. Nia had recently joined a luxury real estate team, and suddenly her world was full of slick-talking brokers, rooftop mixers, curated vacations, and people who measured human worth in labels and followers. She started coming home later, dressing differently, speaking in clipped phrases that sounded borrowed from podcasts and brunch tables. The woman who used to dance barefoot in the kitchen now acted like domestic peace was beneath her. She talked about evolving while treating Omari like deadweight. The cruelest part was how gradually it happened. He kept telling himself marriage had seasons. He didn't yet know she had already invited another man into theirs. That man was Zephan Cole, a 41-year-old developer with a polished beard, expensive loafers, and the kind of confidence that depended entirely on other people being intimidated by him. Zephan wore arrogance like cologne. He liked being seen, liked being envied, liked leaning on furniture he didn't own while talking too loudly about ownership, legacy, and leverage. Nia mentioned him often, always casually. Zephan says the market is shifting. Zephan knows a lender. Zephan thinks we should reconsider our whole investment strategy. Omari noticed that whenever she said Zephan's name, her face sharpened. There was admiration there, and worse, there was performance. She wanted Omari to hear it. One Friday evening, Omari came home early from a canceled install with white dust still clinging to his work boots. He noticed two things immediately: unfamiliar laughter from the kitchen, and his daughter's bedroom door cracked open. Amaya was supposed to be at Nia's sister's house. He stepped quietly down the hall and saw his child sitting on the edge of her bed with headphones around her neck, eyes glossy, pretending not to hear the adults. When he asked why she was home, she whispered, "Mama said to stay in my room because company was here." Something about the way she said company made his chest tighten. Then he heard Nia laughing again, too free, too close, too intimate. He walked into the kitchen and found Zephan sitting on a bar stool, sleeves rolled up like he belonged there. Nia stood beside him in one of Omari's old college T-shirts, wine glass in hand, her face registering shock for less than a second before hardening into annoyance. Zephan did not even stand up. He lifted Omari's favorite ceramic mug, the black one with Amaya's dad printed in faded gold, and took a slow sip. The disrespect was so deliberate it made the room feel smaller. Omari looked from the mug to Nia to the half-empty bottle on the counter. "What is this?" he asked. Nia shrugged like he was interrupting her television show. What happened next became the moment Omari replayed in his head for months. Nia didn't deny anything. She exhaled, set down her wine, and said, "Since we're here, let's stop pretending." Zephyr smirked and looked away, as if giving husband and wife privacy while sitting in the husband's kitchen. Omari asked again, slower this time, "What is this?" Nia folded her arms and said, "It's what happens when one person in a marriage grows and the other stays comfortable." That sentence landed harder than a slap. Then she added, "I didn't plan for you to find out like this, but maybe now you'll stop acting like being decent is the same thing as being enough." Amaya heard everything. That was the part Omari could never forgive. His daughter came halfway into the hallway just in time to hear Nia say, "Zephyr makes me feel alive. You make me feel managed." Omari turned immediately and told Amaya to go back into her room, but children hear with their whole body. The shame in her face cut him deeper than the affair itself. He moved toward the hall, wanting to protect her from more. But Nia kept talking, almost as if humiliation had become its own performance. "Don't walk away from a grown conversation," she said loudly. "You walked away from passion for years." Even Zephyr looked uneasy then, but not uneasy enough to leave. Omari did not scream. That made Nia even meaner. Some people become crueler when they cannot provoke chaos. She wanted a scene she could later retell as proof of his instability, but he gave her stillness instead. He told Zephyr to leave. Zephyr looked at Nia before standing, which told Omari all he needed to know. The man wasn't bold. He was invited. On his way out, Zephyr patted Omari on the shoulder and said, "This doesn't have to get ugly." Omari stared at the hand until it dropped away. After the door closed, Nia laughed once, a short, ugly laugh, and said the sentence that truly ended their marriage. "You were the safe choice. I'm done pretending I'm grateful." The divorce conversation started that same night, but Nia treated it like a negotiation she had already won. She claimed the house should be sold. She wanted half of his business valuation. She wanted primary custody because Omari worked too much. She said it all with a cold professionalism that felt rehearsed. When he asked how long the affair had been going on, she said, "Long enough for me to know I deserve better." That phrase, "deserve better," followed him like smoke. She had cheated, humiliated him in front of their child, invited her lover into his home, and still cast herself as a deprived one. Some betrayals are painful. Others are insulting. This one was both. In the weeks that followed, Omari found out the humiliation had not started in his kitchen. It had been happening in rooms he never entered. A mutual friend finally told him Nia had been mocking him at team dinners, calling him nice but provincial, joking that he smelled like sawdust and responsibility, saying she had outgrown blue-collar romance. Someone else admitted Zephyr had met him at a holiday fundraiser months earlier, and later joked that wives like Nia don't stay married to men who still shop at warehouse stores. The details were ugly, but the laughter around them was uglier. Omari wasn't just betrayed. He had been turned into material, into entertainment. The night he learned all that, he sat in his truck outside Lake Wiley with the engine off and his phone in his hand, staring at old family pictures he could barely stand to look at. He thought about how often black men are expected to absorb humiliation and remain noble for everyone else's comfort. He thought about how quickly people call you bitter when you finally refuse disrespect. He thought about Amaya hearing her mother weaponize her steadiness. Most of all, he thought about the years he had poured into a family that now spoke of him like a draft version of a better life. That was when something inside him changed shape. Not rage. Precision. He hired a divorce attorney named Drusilla Pike, a woman with silver locks, immaculate suits, and a courtroom voice like sharpened glass. Drusilla listened without interrupting, then asked 3 questions that changed everything. Whose name was on the house deed? Omari's. Who had founded the business before marriage? Omari had, with records. And who had been paying for Nia's recently expanded work expenses? Omari again, through a joint account linked to business overflow. Drusilla leaned back and said, "Good, because she's acting like a queen on a stage built from your receipts." For the first time in weeks, Omari almost smiled. He wasn't powerless. He had simply been grieving. What Nia did not know was that her ambition had made her sloppy. She had encouraged Omari for years to keep detailed records of taxes, permits, payroll, and bids. He had folders for everything, including household transfers, tuition payments, maintenance invoices, and account histories. Drusilla's team discovered that Nia had used joint funds for hotel stays, luxury dinners, spa weekends, and gifts that were quietly labeled as client entertainment. There were messages tying Zephyr to some of the spending, and even more importantly, evidence that Nia had been planning to pressure Omari into selling the house quickly so she could leverage cash for a condo investment deal with Zephyr. She hadn't just cheated. She had schemed. Still, Omari's sharpest focus remained his daughter. Amaya became quieter after the separation, asking questions no child should have to form. Did Mommy stop loving us? Was I supposed to stay in my room forever? Did I do something because I told Grandma I heard laughing? Omari answered carefully, never poisoning her against her mother, even when the truth begged to be spilled. That restraint made his eventual comeback even colder. He was not acting from chaos. He was building from discipline. At night, after Amaya slept, he sat at the dining table where Nia used to host wine nights and organize binders until dawn. Grief turned into documents. Documents turned into strategy. Meanwhile, Nia behaved like a woman already living in her victory speech. She posted filtered photos from rooftop bars, captioned with lines about alignment, peace, and choosing herself. She began wearing Zephyr's last name in jokes before any paperwork existed. In one viral office clip, she and her co-workers discussed starter husbands and laughed when she said, "Sometimes the first man is just who teaches you what you won't settle for." Omari saw the clip only because someone sent it with an apology. Thousands of strangers had watched his marriage get repackaged into a self-love anecdote. That humiliation nearly dragged him into fury. Instead, he saved the video and sent it to Drusilla. Then came the charity gala, the event that finally gave Omari the opening he needed. Zephyr was being honored for community-forward development, and Nia was attending on his arm in a gold dress she had once said was too much for married life. Their names appeared in a local society column before the divorce had even finalized. Drusilla told Omari not to attend unless he could remain composed. He bought a ticket anyway, not for drama, but for timing. He wore a tailored black suit, said little, and moved through the room like a man who had buried something heavy and had no intention of digging it back up. People noticed him immediately. At first, the room responded exactly how Nia would have wanted. There were whispers, side glances, fake sympathy, and the subtle thrill people get when scandal walks in dress well. Nia saw Omari from across the ballroom and smiled the same way she had smiled in the kitchen, with superiority. Zephyr kept one hand at her lower back, like he was presenting conquest. Omari nodded once and continued greeting people, including several contractors, 2 lenders, and 1 city councilman who knew his work ethic firsthand. What Nia had forgotten, in her rush toward status, was that Charlotte's social scene and Charlotte's business scene overlapped, and Omari had been quietly respected in both for years. When Zephyr took the stage to accept his award, he launched into a speech about integrity, impact, and building futures people could trust. Omari watched several faces in the audience while the man spoke. He saw admiration, boredom, ambition, and envy, but he also saw recognition when Drusilla, seated 2 tables away, discreetly distributed sealed packets to 3 individuals, a journalist, a donor, and a compliance officer attached to a financing group Zephyr desperately needed. Inside those packets were legally obtained records, not salacious screenshots, not revenge porn, not anything reckless, just financial documentation showing Zephyr's involvement in misrepresented expense trails, overlapping vendor conflicts, and personal benefit tied to ethically questionable transactions. Clean, precise, devastating. Omari did not have to interrupt the speech. He did not have to shout, accuse, or throw a drink. Real brutality is often administrative. By the end of the gala, phones were already lighting up. The journalist stepped outside twice. The donor stopped smiling. The compliance officer left before dessert. Nia noticed a shift before Zephyr did. She kept trying to pull people back into conversation, but their eyes had changed. The energy around them cooled by degrees. Zephyr finished his speech to applause that sounded thinner than it should have. 10 minutes later, one of his partners approached him with the face of a man who had just seen fire reach the curtains. Nia cornered Omari near the valet stand, fury rippling beneath a polished voice. "What did you do?" she hissed. Omari looked at her for a long second, taking in the diamond earrings he had once financed, the perfume he used to buy, the expression that always appeared when she believed herself entitled to answers. "I told the truth to people with something to lose," he said. "That's all." She stared at him, stunned not by the action but by the tone. There was no begging left in him, no hurt she could feed on, just distance. For the first time since the affair became public, Nia looked smaller than the image she had built. The collapse came fast. Zephin's financing deal was frozen pending review. 2 board invitations disappeared. A niche real estate blog posted questions about expense irregularities and undeclared personal ties in project hospitality spending. No one named Nia directly at first, but people in her circle knew exactly who the aging companion was. Her office, once delighted by her glamour, became colder. The same co-workers who laughed at her jokes began guarding their own reputations. Screenshots of her star-to-husband clip resurfaced beside commentary about classism and respectability. The internet, which had flattered her vanity, now sharpened its teeth. Public humiliation is addictive until the spotlight turns. At home, the legal case turned harsher. Drusilla presented evidence of dissipation of marital assets, misuse of joint funds, and conduct that had directly exposed the child to emotional distress. The judge did not care about the affair morally. Courts usually don't. But the financial paper trail mattered. The documented incident involving Amaya hearing the confrontation mattered. Nia's social media ridicule mattered when paired with a broader pattern. She did not lose everything, but she lost the fantasy. The house would not be forced into a rushed sale. The business remained largely protected. Custody would be structured, not handed over according to her assumptions. Consequences, finally, had entered the room. The hardest scene came when Amaya had to meet with a child specialist during the custody process. Omari sat outside the office hearing faint pieces of his daughter's little voice through the wall. Later, the specialist told the court that Amaya associated laughter in the house with fear now. Fear, because grown people wanted excitement, because ego wanted applause, because cruelty liked an audience. When Omari heard that word, he had to grip the edge of the table to keep steady. Nia cried during that hearing, maybe from guilt, maybe from embarrassment, maybe because consequences feel unbearable when you never imagined they could reach you. Omari did not comfort her. Some tears arrived too late. Still, the comeback wasn't complete. Omari understood that winning legally was one thing, reclaiming dignity was another. So he rebuilt in public without ever speaking directly about the betrayal. He expanded his company, rebranded it as Vance Heritage Floors, and partnered with an interior designer named Celestine Rowe, a brilliant black entrepreneur whose quiet confidence reminded him that maturity could still exist in beautiful forms. They launched a scholarship for trade apprentices, especially young black men and women overlooked by traditional career paths. Local news covered the initiative. Clients rallied around it. Omari's name, once passed around as a joke in certain rooms, began circulating with admiration in others. He stopped being the punchline. Nia, by contrast, discovered that proximity to status is not the same as possessing character. Zephin grew irritable under pressure and eventually distanced himself from her, claiming they both needed space from optics. That phrase alone would have made the comments section explode. After all the speeches about feeling alive, after all the condescending talk about growth and evolution, she was discarded like a branding problem. Omari heard through mutual connections that she tried to salvage her image, then tried to blame him, then tried to reframe the affair as a misunderstood transition. But stories lose power when receipts exist. Spin only works when facts are weak. In this case, they weren't. One evening, months later, Nia asked to meet at a coffee shop in South End to discuss healing. Omari almost declined, but Drusilla advised one final documented conversation might clarify co-parenting boundaries. Nia arrived looking impeccable but tired around the eyes in a way Cantu could not hide. She spoke softly at first, saying she had been lost, overwhelmed, intoxicated by attention. Then came the real reason for the meeting. Her reputation was damaged, her listings were down, and she needed flexibility on certain financial terms. Omari listened without expression. When she finally whispered, "You didn't have to ruin everything," he nearly laughed. She still thought exposure was ruin, not behavior. He leaned forward and said the sentence that would sit with her longer than any court order. "I didn't ruin your life, Nia. I removed the stage lights." She blinked, and for once there was no comeback ready. He continued, calm as winter. "You were comfortable being cool as long as you thought the room would clap. The minute people saw you clearly, you called it destruction." Then he slid a revised co-parenting calendar across the table, signed, organized, precise. No emotional speech. No final argument. Just terms. That was the brutality of it. He no longer needed her understanding, apology, or regret. Indifference, after love, can feel like a locked door with no handle. On the drive home, Omari expected to feel triumphant. Instead, he felt tired, older, strangely hollow around the edges. Revenge stories often skip that part. People imagine the comeback heals a wound, when really it just stops the bleeding. Healing came later in smaller moments. Amaya laughing freely again while baking cinnamon rolls on a Saturday morning, his crew surprising him with a framed article about the scholarship launch, Celestine texting him a photo of the first apprentice finishing a custom herringbone foyer with pride written all over his face. Life did not become cinematic perfection. It became livable again. Sometimes that is a real flex, peace after public disrespect. The most emotional moment happened on a rainy Thursday when Amaya brought home a school assignment titled The Strongest Person I Know. Omari expected it to be about a superhero or grandmother. Instead, in careful handwriting, she wrote about her father. She wrote that strong people are not the loudest. Strong people are the ones who still pack your lunch when they are sad. Strong people are the ones who do not make you choose sides. Strong people are the ones who fix broken floors and broken feelings without telling everyone how heavy it was. Omari had to put the page down and walk into the garage because some victories break you open in the gentlest way. As for Nia, she kept trying to return in fragments. A late-night message saying she missed the family they used to be. A holiday call that lasted too long after discussing pickup times. A birthday card to Omari with a sentence crossed out so hard the indentation remained. "I never thought you'd become this man." He had already become this man. She just never respected him enough to notice. That is something viewers always debate in stories like this. Did she love him and lose sight of it? Or did she only love what his stability made available to her? Drop that in the comments, because people will argue both sides are ours. The city moved on, as cities do. New scandals replaced old ones. New couples appeared at galas. New hashtags rose and died. But reputation has an aftertaste, and some names never recover the flavor they once had. Omari's business thrived. He bought a new home with a sunlit breakfast nook for Amaya and a workshop large enough to teach classes on weekends. He planted a Japanese maple in the front yard and let peace become visible. Not flashy, not performative, just earned. The most ruthless part of his comeback was that he never became the bitter monster people expected. He became undeniable, stable, respected, unbothered. Success can humiliate louder than revenge ever could. And that night in the kitchen, the one that started with laughter and ended with something inside him turning to steel, became just another room in his memory. Still painful, still sharp at the corners, but no longer the center of the house in his mind. That's a lesson people miss when they hear stories like this. The cruelest betrayal doesn't always deserve your collapse. Sometimes it deserves your discipline. Sometimes a brutal comeback is not screaming, not fighting, not wrecking lives in blind rage. Sometimes it is exposing the truth, protecting your child, keeping your money, reclaiming your name, and letting the people who mocked your quiet strength choke on the sight of it. So tell me in the comments, did Omari go too far, or was this exactly the kind of cold comeback Nia earned? Was exposing the truth brutal, or was it simply justice dressed in a tailored suit? And be honest, what was the moment that hurt the most? The affair? The kitchen humiliation? Amaya hearing it? Or Nia calling him the safe choice? Hit like if this story had you heated. Subscribe if you want more emotional betrayal stories with endings that actually satisfy. And remember this, some people only respect love after they lose access to it forever.